title, RDI Webinar Series. Hi, good morning, good mid-afternoon for those on the East Coast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Designing for Accessibility Global Awareness Day celebration. We have got quite the event for you happening today. I want to say hello to everyone. We have 47 people joining us in the room right now. So before we get started, hi everyone. My name is Mariella Paulino. I am the Advocacy and Social Media Manager here at AudioEye. My audio description, I am a Hispanic woman. I have long black hair. I am wearing a black shirt from one of my favorite organizations, Teach Access. And the shirt is a black shirt that says Study Away Virtual Edition 2021. I am in my home office, but you will not see that background. Instead, as the background, I have a purple and green gradient with the AudioEye logo. And my preferred gender pronouns are she and hers. Welcome, and we are so grateful that you are joining us for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Well, let's go into the next slide. Our agenda, what do we have planned for you today? We are going to go over 3 important questions for today's webinar. We're going to talk about why is it important to involve people with disabilities in the design process. Then we'll talk about what are some best practices and examples of creating inclusive digital experiences. And then finally, we will wrap up with some best practices and examples of creating inclusive digital experiences. We will have a Q&A that you will be able to access. Now, we have a very important guest that's joining us today. So we have a member of the AudioEye leadership team, Dominic, who will be making a very quick announcement. Dominic, let's bring you up on the screen. The stage is yours, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariella. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dominic Barricali. I am AudioEye's Chief Operating Officer. I'm also a white male wearing all black with black hair. My background is the same kind of purple and green gradient that Mariella and all the presenters have. We know all businesses don't have the internal expertise to understand accessibility or to be able to remediate at scale. They're looking for partners to help drive accessibility initiatives throughout the organization, all the content they have, mobile apps, websites, other digital experiences. And that's why it's exciting to be here on this GAAD, because the mission of Global Accessibility Awareness Day is to kind of disrupt the culture of technology and product development to include accessibility as part of everything we do as a core requirement. And we're here proud to support that initiative. So this webinar, we're going to get to learn from some of our amazing Alliance members and advocates like Mariella, Max, and Anna. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I hope you enjoy the webinar that we put together. So Mariella, I'm just going to pass it back to you.
Thank you, Dominic. So let's go and introduce our panelists for today. We are going to be joined by Anna Jacob and Maxwell Ivey. So Anna, please go ahead, do your audio description, your role, your preferred gender pronoun. One other thing I forgot to mention during my introduction is that in addition to being a Hispanic woman and my preferred gender pronouns, I also have a hearing disability. I use something that's called a cochlear implant to hear. And because the conversation today is going to be about advocacy and disability from the perspective of disability, I'm so excited to be sharing this stage with my colleagues. Anna, I'll pass it along to you first.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Jacob. I am a digital accessibility consultant and advocate at AudioEye. I'm a white female with shoulder-length brown hair. I'm sitting in a motorized wheelchair in my home office, though my background is the same as the other presenters here. I'm wearing a t-shirt that has the AudioEye logo on it. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and I am a person with multiple disabilities. I'm totally blind. And so I use a screen reader as my assistive technology, and I have mobility disabilities, so I use a wheelchair as my mobility aids. and I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Max.
Hello, I'm Maxwell Ivey. I am an older white male from Houston, Texas. I am almost totally blind and also depend on a screen reader, as does Anna. We've already mentioned we're all sitting in front of the same backgrounds. I am in my home office / bedroom. I've got on a nice white button-down dress shirt with my my favorite Lucky Jerry Garcia tie that's blue, red, and purple. I have short, medium to dark brown curly hair, and my preferred pronouns are he, him, and his.
I am so excited to be with the two of you today. I have been privileged enough to be a part of the stories that you have shared. And I just feel it's time for others to also learn from you and hear your stories. So let's get right to it. Anna and Max, are you guys ready?
Yes.
Let's do this.
Let's do this. So let's go over the first question. Why is it important to involve people with disabilities in the design process? And Anna, I know you have lots of thoughts about this, so go for it.
Every time I get asked this question, I come up with a different answer, which I think is a good thing, because that means that there's a whole bunch of different angles that we can come at this from. There's a lot of angles we can take, a lot of changes we can make. So the one that comes to mind right now is, for the most part, we use this technology day in, day out. We're really familiar with it. We rely on it. And so we're equipped to test websites and show you what's not working and what is working. If you don't have disabled people involved from the very beginning, you're gonna have a harder time doing what you need to do later on. Build accessibility in from the ground up is a lot easier than trying to fix it later. And that's where we can come in and tell you what works and what doesn't, and kind of show you what the best practices are.
Thank you, Anna. Max, I know you also have lots to say on this topic. Why is it important to involve people with disabilities in the design process?
One of the most important reasons is that when we design in a more inclusive fashion, we can avoid a lot of the mistakes that we may have made. I find that when people consider accessibility in designing, especially on the development of websites, apps, and creating content, that they're more likely to create better content, more compelling content, the kind of thing that lets them connect with their audience in a way that builds a friendship or relationship that leads to that like, know, and trust that every entrepreneur is seeking, that eventually leads to sales and to a more successful business. So really, when we consider everyone that may use a product or service in the design, we make it better for everybody that uses it and better results for the owner.
I love that. And I'm definitely going to be coming back to that in a moment. I would love to go into the second question. What progress has been made so far? And what opportunities exist for businesses to design with accessibility in mind? Max, I'd love to start with you.
Well, I think one of the great indications of the amount of progress that's being made is the amount of conversations that we're having on the subject. So many more people are open to information on accessibility, are wanting people to present on the subject at conferences, webinars, meetings. There just seems to be a desire to have us at the table that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago. The other aspect is 5 or 6 years ago, even, I was still finding myself the only visually impaired person working with a particular company or using a particular product or service. And it's just so great to not be the only blind person anymore. And that's been a big change, because the more of us that they see and interact with, the more likely they are to believe that accessibility is something they really need to do.
So Max, I don't think everyone knows about your work. And I would love to use this as an opportunity to maybe have you talk about what it is that you do. You talked about starting this work 5 or 6 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about how that started and what it was like really being the only blogger who was blind doing this work. Like, how did that happen?
Right. So in actuality, I've been at this 15 years, since September of 2007. I am known as the blind blogger in many circles because at that time I was the only blind person most people knew who also happened to be a blogger, and the name just kind of stuck. I've started first helping people sell used amusement equipment because I'm a former carnival owner, and later transitioned to inspiring and motivating people to make change in their life. And then thanks to Audio Eye last summer, now branching into accessibility and inclusion and using all my lived experience fighting with website owners over the years and having conversations that led to improvements to be an expert and a thought leader in this area. So it's been a long change. And really, I was the only blind person, as far as most people thought, who was blogging, later on was podcasting. And I still get people today who will go, man, how does a blind person even have a blog? How does a blind person have a podcast? Thankfully, I don't get that question or that response anywhere near as much as I did 5 or 6 years ago. But there are still some people who haven't been exposed to me or to Anna or to you, Mariella, or to any of the other amazing people that are out there every day creating blogs, podcasts, books, albums, etc. So yeah, it's been 15 long years. I'm still here, thank goodness. And really did not realize I was an advocate for accessibility until y'all told me I was.
I love that. And it's so interesting because so many of us just really go out there and do these things, like create blogs and create these channels. And we just unintentionally stumble into doing advocacy work. And this becomes a lifelong journey to get others to understand how important it is to continue to build and to continue to create with accessibility. So, Anna, I'll pose the same question to you. What progress has been made so far, and what opportunities exist for businesses to design with accessibility in mind? Go for it, Anna.
I'm going to kind of build off of what Max said. I remember when I would email companies about accessibility or lack thereof, and the response I would get were along the lines of, wait, what's a screen reader? Is that like Siri? And I explained to them what a screen reader is, roughly how it works, and all that stuff, and they still think it's Siri. So at least nowadays, people know what a screen reader is. People know that blind people can and do use computers. We are out here in the wild. We are doing shopping and browsing, and we're a lot of the customers and clients that are out here doing business. So at least people know we exist, and they know roughly what technology we use. Although it wasn't very long ago that I emailed a company with an online store, and I told them that there was no product description for their products, no text at all. And they emailed me back and said, okay, we've added an accessible overlay to our website. That should help. And needless to say, that didn't help. Now we can have a whole other conversation about overlays, but the point was they didn't even understand that what I was talking about was adding a text description to each of their products. So we do still have a long way to go, but that kind of response is a lot more rare than it used to be.
There was something that you touch on that I would love to explore a little bit. But you talk there about just reaching out to companies. Do you find that you have been doing that a lot more or a lot less over the last few years? Because one point that we keep going back to in our conversations is that only 3% of the internet is accessible. Have you noticed an improvement over the last few years in that number?
I don't really have a simple answer. I don't usually have a simple answer to anything, but I don't have a simple answer to this one because on the one hand, things are better and I don't feel a need to email quite so often. But on the other hand, there are still a lot of problems out there and you just get exhausted writing so many emails to so many companies. You can kind of get burned out on having to reach out so much. So I think I've stumbled into that sometimes too, where I could reach out. I should email them, but I do so much of that that frankly, I would just rather go somewhere else. And that's, I think, an important take-home point is if your website isn't accessible, if we can't do what we need to do without a lot of back and forth, we're probably going to go somewhere else. And I don't mean that as a threat. I mean, just in terms of, in order to get done what we need to get done, we will go where we can actually access what we need. So, I've gotten burnt out sometimes where I don't email as much as I should, but I don't see as much of a need for it as I used to. But there is still plenty of room for improvement out there.
That's a great point that you bring up, Anna, because one of the big challenges that a lot of companies have is that they don't even know that they're being inaccessible. And I'm sure you felt this way as well, is that as a consequence of COVID. And Max, feel free to chime in as well. As a consequence of COVID, we have seen that the world has increasingly moved online. We go to concerts online. We go to school online. We go to webinars and events like this online. We go shopping online significantly more than we did prior to the pandemic. And so there's an increasing number of websites that don't also recognize that they need to be made accessible so that a diverse client community can go and shop online. And you talked, Anna, about how when you go to a website and the website is not accessible, it's kind of just like going to a physical store. If you're not able to enter into the store because the store doesn't have ramps for you to enter, you will just go to the store across the street. That
Exactly.
Exactly. Like you will have the store across the street that has those ramps, that is making an effort. And you tend to become a loyal customer of that brand because they are prioritizing you as a customer. So I absolutely love that. And I think it really highlights the importance for more businesses to prioritize accessibility in their way of doing businesses. Max, I'm wondering, are there any experiences that you'd love to highlight here? I know that you recently went shopping at a large retailer. I'm curious if there's a story that you want to share with our audiences today.
So yes, I have been putting off using the Walmart website out of anxiety based on past experiences with large enterprise-based websites like theirs. And but I finally decided I was going to face that fear, and so I signed up with the account, added my credit card, went through their shopping process, which every step of the way I was pleasantly surprised to find out just how accessible it was for me, and using a screen reader. And even the delivery process, I've had trouble with the other delivery companies around here, trying to take stuff to the wrong door of my house, and then that door doesn't open to the inside of the house, so somebody has to actually walk around to the side of the building and look in the weeds. So they even, put the merchandise exactly where I told them to leave the merchandise, and then they sent me a text message saying it was there. So every step of the way, I was pleasantly surprised with the accessibility, including, if not full descriptions, at least enough of a text with images so that I knew which image or which item I was on. And the search engine was also very friendly. So it was a great example of how, when a company wants to, they can do things right. And my only disappointment with them is my brother works for them, so I wasn't able to give them a 5-star review and enter their drawing for the giveaway they run for people that review their service. But I did get a nice article out of it for the AudioEye website. And if people want to read more about that experience, they can go to audioeye.com/blog, which is where they'll also find some of Anna's great articles. And I just wanted to make one short comment about what Anna said about sending emails. I agree. I'm having to send less of them nowadays. The other thing that I think is important is more people that I email respond promptly. They respond with more positive replies than they used to. And I'm finding more and more people that answer those emails at least have a rudimentary knowledge of accessibility and adaptive technology, which is a big improvement.
That was an exceptional response, Max. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anna, I actually want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned how just a few short years ago, you would reach out to companies and say, hey, I am a screen reader user. And people would be like, what is a screen reader? And I have to believe that most everyone here knows what a screen reader is. But for those people that may not know what a screen reader is, or maybe this is their first time learning about accessibility, they want to do better. Can you try explaining what a screen reader is for those that may not know?
It's not Siri to start with, but it's software that literally does what the name implies. It reads what's on the screen. So most of us use a keyboard to navigate around the computer, websites, email, all the various things that we do. And as we use the keyboard to navigate, the software will tell us where we are on the screen, what buttons and links there are. It'll read whatever text is there, etc., assuming, there's always a caveat, assuming that the website or app is programmed in such a way that it's compatible with the screen reader and doesn't give it any issues. So having a screen reader doesn't automatically give us access to anything and everything or every website out there. Some websites are very, very nice to use, easy to use, lots of headings, lots of well-labeled links and buttons and all that good stuff. Other times it's a real slog just to try to make a purchase or find information or dig through all that to find a phone number we need or what have you. So it makes a huge difference. But when you develop a website or apps, you're really going to make it a lot easier for us to get stuff done. You're going to make it a lot harder for us to get stuff done, or in some cases, make it literally impossible to do it without help. But yeah, basically the screen reader is what we use to read the screen. That's a quick and dirty explanation.
I love it. Thank you. So I want to just let everyone know or remind everyone that we have the Alliance team here at AudioEye, and we have over 100 different people with a range of disabilities to do accessibility testing of your website or app. So make sure that you check that out on the AudioEye webpage. All righty, let's go into the third question for today. One of the things that I like to focus on is not always about talking about the problem. It's also about talking about the solution to the problem. So the last question for today is, what are some best practices and examples of creating inclusive digital experiences? Anna, I would love to start with you.
If a website isn't accessible, I'll literally take my business elsewhere. I do want to add, though, it doesn't have to be perfect. If I go to a website and I'm trying to get something done and I'm having trouble, and I reach out to the tech team or whoever and tell them that I'm having issues, whether I continue doing business with them or not also depends on how they respond to that. A lot of times people are very receptive and they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry you're having so much trouble. Tell me what's going on. And, it's a very welcome response. They're open, they're curious, they're eager to help. And in cases like that, I'm glad to continue working with them. So I wanted to reassure anybody who thinks, well, if it's not perfect, then, why bother? It's not that bad. It's just that if the response I get is, we'll pass this on to the development team, and then I don't hear anything else, that's not helpful. I wanted to go in that direction. Can you repeat your question, Mariella, please?
Absolutely. The question is, what are some best practices and examples of creating inclusive digital experiences?
One of my favorite things to talk about along these lines is alt text, which is the description of pictures and images on websites. And the presence or absence of alt text makes an enormous difference on how I feel as I'm browsing through a website. Good alt text or even existing alt text at all makes me feel like the developers have put some effort into including me and other blind people in the experience. When there's no alt text, I don't know what is in the image, what it looks like, what information it's trying to convey, any of that stuff. So putting a description up there lets me know what I'm dealing with. So if I'm shopping, don't just have an alt text that says a t-shirt, say. Tell me what the t-shirt looks like, what color it is, whether it's like a V-neck or a turtleneck or etc. The more details you include, the better it is for most of us.
I love that, Anna. And I think it's also very important to recognize that alt text doesn't just help people who are blind or who have vision disabilities. Having these descriptions helps everyone. I recently shopped for a suit, and the suit had the sleeves, but the sleeves, which I thought were folded, were actually sewn in. And so I had to waste an entire month going through the return, exchange, and all of this could have very easily been avoided if the description could have been put on the website. So it's something very simple. And I also want to highlight that it's not just about the developers. Designers also have a responsibility to create that alt text. Content creators, if you're putting content on TikTok, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, always make sure that you add that alt text description. And if you add a video, adding a video description to explain the content of what is going on. It usually takes a few extra minutes, but it makes a huge difference for everyone. It makes your content significantly more accessible and inclusive. So thank you so much for that great example. And I'm going to encourage more people to watch this video because that is like one of the most basic things that you can do to get started with accessibility. Max, I would love to pass that same question to you. What are some best practices and examples of creating inclusive digital experiences?
I would say one of the first ones, and this applies to screen readers as well as screen magnification users, is the number of items on a screen. And I encourage people to think long and hard about whether or not they need something on their homepage. It's much easier with a screen reader and with screen magnification to click on a link that's part of your main menu and then follow that to the second or third level page. And it actually applies even more to screen magnification users because as the size of their text gets larger, they can see less and less of the screen. And that makes it harder for them to find the item on the screen that they particularly need. Of course, you can balance that out with headings and with a good search engine to overcome that. But I would prefer to see less items on each screen wherever possible. And then another one that is really a problem because most people don't talk about it a lot is the fact that with a screen reader, you don't have access to a mouse click most of the time. Sometimes you can simulate it, but that's not always reliable. So creating keyboard combinations for mouse click actions, and that probably applies more to app developers than to websites, but even in some websites, I'm seeing shortcut keys available. And these are very beneficial to your screen reader users. They also make things easier for the sighted users as well. And the other point is if you are going to make those things available to make our lives easier, create a list of those keys and keep it up to date so we always know how to find what we need to find quickly.
Thank you for that, Max. That was incredibly useful. And I hope that the developers that are listening to today's webinar are taking notes. For myself, as a person with a hearing disability, one of the things that I mostly depend on is having the closed captioning. And so whenever I go online on social media and I am watching a fun video, and that video doesn't have the closed captioning, I always feel incredibly excluded, just because I just wish that people took those 2 extra minutes to think about just having the closed captioning at the very minimum, automatic closed captioning to facilitate my access. So I completely relate and empathize with the two of you, and I am absolutely committed to making sure that I am applying these things that we talk about today, and that we will be sharing in resources to everything that I do. We do have quite a bit of time for some Q&A. So we already have a few questions that have been answered in the chat room. I am going to go ahead and read them out. So the first question we have here is from John Lanza. Is this webinar targeted for potential clients or for assisting clients? We are an assisting client. And this webinar is actually meant for both potential and current customers. And this is all about celebrating Global Accessibility Awareness Day, known as GAAD. So this is really for everyone. The next question we have is from an anonymous attendee. How many people with disabilities are involved in the Audio Eye Alliance advocacy team? We have two superstars here today. We have Anna Jacob and Maxwell Ivey, but we are proud to work with over 100 members of the Audio Eye Alliance community who do testing and auditing across the range of websites and apps as part of that community. The next question we have is, have you collected the tips and advice in the designing for accessibility in a PDF document that can be consulted? We do. We have a few resources that we will be sharing with those that register for today's webinar. So we have the Accessible Web Design Guide, and we also have tips like Maxwell mentioned. We have the Audio Eye blog, which you can find at audioeye.com/blog. And we have so many resources, so many tips that you can read through. So we will be sharing with you 5 tips for creating accessible website that we will be sharing in the follow-up email. Now, we've got quite a bit of Q&A questions. We have some staff members in the background. So I don't know if you want to pick these questions and then answer them, or if you want me to go ahead.
I can go ahead and read them, and you all can give a response if you have a point of view. First off, I will say, in addition to questions, Anna and Max, there were a number of comments just saying that they loved your content. Your answers were super informative and helpful, and lots of comments on just how valuable the things were that you said. So I want to pass on those good words and thanks from the audience today. What specific screen readers do each of you use to browse?
Mostly I use a Macintosh computer and my iPhone, both of which have the screen reader called VoiceOver, which is built into all of Apple's products. I have used Windows and NVDA some, but my own personal favorite and go-to is VoiceOver.
I would agree with Anna. My personal favorite is VoiceOver. The fact that their screen reader is built into the operating system, whereas when you use Windows, you're using a third-party app that is always playing catch-up with updates to the Windows operating system.
Right.
Makes a huge difference in the user experience between Mac and Windows.
Fabulous. This question is along the same lines. I am a web developer who would like to start testing my sites using a screen reader. Which screen reader software is the most popular, or would you recommend use for testing purposes?
Both. All of it. As much of it as you can do. Which kind of goes back into get us involved. Because we use these, we're familiar with them, we know how they work, the ins and outs. So the best recommendation that I have is to get actual screen reader users on your website, testing it in real time, seeing what works and what doesn't, giving you feedback, be in communication with them, ask them questions, and so on and so forth. If you have at least one person with each major screen reader out there, VoiceOver, NVDA, JAWS, then I think you're on the right track. Preferably more. More is better, but at least one person that's proficient in each of those would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree. The more, the better, because each visually impaired person is going to have a different comfort level with their technology and they're going to have different abilities with it. So the solutions that each person will use given their technology will vary from one person to the next. I would also mention that there is a free website checker on the audioi.com website. So that may be a good place for you to start, and as an introduction possibly to working with the team if you're not already a client.
Fantastic. For e-commerce shops that have a single product, but multiple color variants, do you consider it a best practice to call out the product with a color change in the alt text? An example they gave would be an image of a sofa with a white frame and navy cushions.
You mind if I take this, Max?
No, go ahead.
I do a lot of online shopping and I have lots of feelings on it. Be clear with the colors in different places. The description, the alt text, the buttons or radio buttons or checkboxes or whatever you use to actually select the product color that you want. Make sure that those are labeled clearly. And to that, by the way, please use normal color names: red, blue, green, orange. Don't name stuff like sunset or daybreak or those random things that it's really hard for us to know what the heck color that even means. So if you stick to normal, or if you're gonna use daydream and other cutesy color names like that, if you must do that, then put a description of what that shade looks like. But preferably just stick to a more simple, straightforward green, yellow, purple type of approach.
And I agree with Anna. The most important thing is confidence in your selection. So if your site is set up so that you're going to select a color for that one item and then purchase it, it's really important to know that the color you selected is actually the color that the website understands that you selected, so that when you get that item in the mail, you're not going to be upset that it was the color next to the box that you selected.
Right. Good point, Max.
Awesome. This question, I think a little bit of a fun one. They're interested in working on some video projects. So they're wondering if there is a movie that either of you enjoy that was a lot more accessible than expected when relying on assistive technology, since they understand that audio descriptions can at times talk over dialogue in films.
I have one example, but it's not from a film. It's I was impressed with how much I was able to follow along with the Broadway show Wicked. There was a lot of narration in that presentation, and there was at least one character with a disability. So that was one experience I've had. I do agree that with described audio, sometimes the descriptions do talk over the audio. But the other thing is you can listen to an audio described movie by different companies, because I sometimes will listen to the same show broadcast in the UK and then listen to it again broadcast in the United States, and different narrators, different describers will pick up on different aspects of the video background. And so sometimes the only way I really feel like I've watched a movie is to listen to it without descriptions, and then listen to it with UK descriptions, and then listen to it with American descriptions. And then from then on, I can just fill in all the stuff that's missing with my own memories.
I don't have a recent example, but one of the most powerful incidents that come to mind for me is I've always loved the movie The Sound of Music. And when I was younger, I watched it without description, and I loved it anyway. And then I watched it with description sometime in my teen years. And I was amazed at how much detail I had been missing and didn't even know it. For example, the scene where the children are playing outside and they're wearing clothing made from what used to be the drapes in Maria's room. There's no dialogue around that, other than Maria being asked about getting new drapes, but I had no idea that she actually used it to make clothes for the kids until I watched it with descriptions. Or the scene where Captain Von Trapp is on this porch and the narrator describes the look of pained concentration on his face as he's pondering his life and decisions and all that. That also I wouldn't have picked up on if not for audio description. So it makes a huge difference, and I'm super grateful for it.
I would love to add to that one. I would encourage everyone, if you have not, I highly encourage you to watch the Netflix documentary, Crip Camp, that talks about the history of the disability rights movement. And it features a woman known as the mother of the disability rights movement named Judy Heumann. She passed away earlier this March. But the movie Crip Camp does an exceptional job of showcasing audio descriptions done right. You can actually watch the documentary for free on YouTube. And if I remember correctly, the most recent Stranger Things season had amazing closed captioning. And I highly encourage everyone to take a look at those, because all of those little details that can also come up in audio are super important as well. So I highly encourage those as two really great examples for best practices in accessibility when watching digital content like films. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you all. One of these questions, it's a little specific. So I think if the answer is no, you can generalize it beyond that. But the person wanted to know if you ever have had an experience with an HVAC contractor website and if it was a positive experience. So I think if the answer is no, what they were kind of wondering was what features made the website easy to use. So specifically to an HVAC contractor, but if not, if you can speak just generally to best practices or things on websites that really make it easy for you.
I would say in general, if I'm considering contracting a service through a website, the most important things to know are, and be able to find easily, are things that tell me about their reputation, their licensing, things that tell me about their usual contract terms, being able to easily navigate whatever agreement I'm going to have to make at the time of purchase. So having those documents available somewhere on the website where I can read them before I have to act on them is very important. Also, anything that tells about how these people will interact in my home. And while not a necessity, it would be really cool if I was able to hear that they had some previous experience with homeowners who had disabilities.
Great. One of the questions, which maybe is a little bit behind the scenes, but is there a rule of thumb on how long alt text can be?
So somebody else should probably speak to the finer points of this. Somebody that isn't me, but one thing that I will say, for my own preference and from talking to other blind people, this seems to be an opinion that's shared among a lot of us. More is better. It's easy to not say enough, and it's hard to say too much. That's my own opinion. I think I have seen a word count of ideally you should have this many words in the alt text, but off the top of my head, I don't remember what that was. If one of you guys knows, have at it.
I'm not familiar with that particular word count, but I do know, just like any other add-ons for the search engine optimization or SEO, that there is a total number of words that either won't be displayed or that won't be indexed. So whatever that number is, I would want to find out what the cutoff is, because like Anna says, more words are better, but only if those words are actually going to reach the user. So if somebody at AudioEye could find out what the word limit is on title, subject, keywords, and alt text, that would be really helpful.
I want to add here, we have our IAAP CPAC certified AudioEye employees here in the background, and they are saying that at 100 to 150 characters, some older versions of JAWS get cut off. So it is ideal for you to stick within 100 to 150 characters, excluding spaces. You should have a better description in the surrounding text for everyone. I also see here from one of our CPAC certified AudioEye employees that it is strongly recommended that all text should not exceed 80 characters, but all text that exceeds 150 characters should be considered unacceptably long and must be shortened. We also have an article that you will be able to find on the AudioEye blog, where we interview screen reader users on what alt text is, how to use it, and some best practices. We will be sharing that in the post-event email. So a lot of resources that we will be sharing afterwards, but it sounds like that golden number is really between 80 and max 150 characters.
Great. Another question, healthcare related. Do either of you have experience with patient portals online, and have those experiences been positive or negative?
Mixed, but mostly negative, I would say. A lot of times it's clunky, it's hard to navigate. If there are forms to be filled out, oftentimes they are PDF images that you're supposed to print out and fill out and take with you instead of online forms, things like that. I do have chronic illness and I deal with appointments and doctors and that kind of thing a fair amount. So I have run into patient portals a good bit, and it's pretty hit and miss in my experience.
Me personally, I've not had any really good experiences with patient portholes. I do my best to avoid using them. I will more readily show up early to an appointment and get the assistance of somebody on staff as opposed to trying to navigate their patient portals, because I feel like I would just be wasting my time, my energy, and my Tylenol to actually try to navigate their portal.
And that, dear audience, should be all the answer you need on the question of patient portals.
We have, I think, time for one more question. And Max, I think you might have put some content together recently on this, so I might have some good opinions, but what are some best practices for web forms that you consider critical to a good experience?
Yes, I did just create a post. I think it was 6 tips for accessible web forms. And the most important thing is for the form navigation to actually take you to where the information needs to go. As Anna mentioned earlier, we have a limited amount of navigation, and with forms, usually you press tab to go from beginning to end and shift tab to go from end to beginning if you need to back up and address previous fields. The most important thing is when I navigate to the next field, it should tell me what needs to go there. If there's a character limit, it should tell me what the limit is. If there's a format requirement, such as passwords having to have certain types of characters, it should tell me that. In a best case situation, it should tell me if I've exceeded the character limit. And when I press submit on a form and I have errors, it should tell me exactly which errors I've made and how to fix them, as opposed to just saying they're errors and not letting my form go to the next phase. Most people have done away with security questions that cause accessibility issues, but some people still have them. In the most part, security questions should have an audio or non-visual option, or they should use something like the Google Chrome aspect, where if you're using Google Chrome, the checkbox pretty much passes you through on the security question. And really remember that these forms are how people interact with your business. So if a form is not accessible, you are putting a roadblock between you and potential clients, customers, and between potential income. So making sure your payment process is accessible, the selection of means of payment, the entering of credit card information, if that's what needs to be done. All of these things are important to an accessible form. And it really just starts with understanding how people with screen readers navigate the forms, which is one of the most important parts of that post. And again, if you create a form, please give us a way of contacting you if we can't navigate the form, because as Anna mentioned, I'm often willing to put up with less than perfect if there's a way to mediate the problems that do exist. And I've really been thankful to those people who have said, okay, we're going to help you finish this form so that you can be a part of our event, or so you can become a customer, or so that you can help us make our work better. So with the forums, that would be the main things, is make them so when I navigate the forum, I go to the next thing, it puts me where I need to enter information, and it helps me know when I'm right and when I've completed the form so I can go on to something else.
All right, everyone, we have got to wrap up. So first thing I want to do is, well, let's bring up that slide, that final slide. We encourage you to stay connected with all of the work that we are doing at AudioEye. So we are most active nowadays on LinkedIn. So make sure that you follow our LinkedIn page at company/AudioEye-INC. You can follow me, Mariella Paulino-Peralta, by going /Mariella Paulino. You can follow Anna by going to Anna J901, repping her area code 901. And then you can follow Maxwell at Maxwell Ivey on LinkedIn. So we are very, very excited to follow up, to continue learning, and of course, celebrating digital accessibility, especially today on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I want to give a major shout out to everyone who made today's webinar possible. So I'd love to bring in Will and Mike, who have been the souls in the machine, helping guide all of the technical things for today's webinar. Let's wrap up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Until next time.